All right. Let's talk about time and let's talk about memory and let's talk about the collective psychosomatic connection between your daily living and the daily living of the ancestors of your past. Let's really do a deep dive. Let's do a little pondering on the nature of nature, right? And let's unlock a familiar truth. Um, but not without beauty, not without deliberation. Let's not do it without first taking a moment to bask in the grandiosity of it all, right? Because you can't really shorten a book. A good book needs to be read because a good book needs to be felt. There's always a substrata of emotional wealth and value that comes with a good book. You can't just sift through the pages and understand its meanings because you will find that how to say, the end meaning of most books, fiction or not, is, rather surface level when you really boil it down to what its general messaging is. And the general messaging could be something as simple as friendship is good or friendship, you know, is victorious at the end. But that's not the philosophical and spiritual quality and the value of the book. The value of the book comes from the inlaid journey that it takes you on as you read it and as you experience it for the first time as the experiencer, right? Um, and the funniest thing about writing in books, which we read linearly, right? It's a linear experience. The funniest thing about it is why they're so magical as a thing is that when you read it, you understand that there is the touch of the author, which is wholly deliberate. This is the story the author interpreted or reinterpreted. And this is the story that the author, you sort of like get an understanding of this is the story they've been wanting to tell. But at some point, especially if it's quality writing, if you're reading a quality book, you sort of like catch the moment where the writing itself, the philosophy of it, the intimacy of it, it drowns itself out in the voice of the author. And you can almost like see the point if you've read many manuscripts, you can see like that there's a turning point in the psychology of the author where the manuscript itself runs away from the author, right? You see it's clear as day, right? Like when you read, like, I don't know, like a, what's a popular modern book like Game of Thrones, right? A Song of Fire and Ice. When you read the series, it's very apparent, at least to me, and it would be to any experienced reader or connoisseur of literature, that like where that point is where the story just runs away from the author. It's almost like the author is sort of like trying to catch it and put it back under control, right? Um, and this is the interesting point about time and linear thought. And it's also an interesting point to regard our own stories and the stories of our own lives in sort of like to see them in the same spectrum. Sometimes the story of your life and the context of your past, it runs away from you, and you end up sort of like, stumbling into things that, you never thought you'd stumble into. You become a symptom of your own choices that you've made in the past, or seemingly in the past, as you and I would understand it. But the primary secret of why we're talking about beauty and the beauty of the journey of the book is because the book is more than what the author writes, always, unequivocally. Um, and to pretend, right, as someone who has authored books, to pretend that all parts of it, all the fantastical and beautiful parts of it, all the grandiose, and perhaps the most valuable parts of it is deliberately written would be unjust because it's not true. At the moment your writing runs away from you, right, is the moment it sort of gains this mystical um, faculty to it, where you understand that it's slowly now becoming something more than what you predisposed it to be. It's becoming more than your story. It has this feeling or sensation or vibe or atmosphere or energy attached to it that inherently wasn't there. So the question is, where did this come from? Where did this sudden magical element, when exactly did this seep into the writing of the author? How did it get there? What prompted it to come into existence? Was it the author? Well, no, because the author is just as dumbfounded by its existence as the reader, right? Was it the manuscript itself? Well, how do you know? It's just a static document. The words that were written in there were written with some degree of deliberation, or and that degree of deliberation probably means your best effort, right? It means like your greatest attempt at reinterpreting the visions that you have in your mind for this particular story. And sometimes when you're writing, you know, right? Like, well, this is supposed to happen after that, and that is supposed to happen after this, and this character feels this way, and that character feels that way. But it doesn't come out that way. It doesn't. You feel like it should, but the words just don't stick, and you feel like, hey man, this is where I wanted to take the story, but like whatever I write feels like shit, right? This is where I imagined myself in my life 5 years ago, but now those same movements, those same things that inspired me to move 5 years ago today, or the movements that I thought would have been inspirational for me right now at this moment, would feel incredible, but they don't. And it's exactly this deficit, right, that we give ourselves. Is this deficit of not having that promise met that confuses us, right? 5 years ago, I imagined myself to be a certain way, in a certain financial condition, in a certain spiritual condition. But my understanding of heightened spiritual conditions 5 years ago was lacking compared to now. So, how could I have summoned or conjured up an image of myself in the future, knowing this and that and all of these things, when I didn't even know or understand the depth um, it would require to even get there? So, what I thought would have made me happy 5 years ago doesn't really make me happy right now, right? Why? Because we have changed. We have become more than what we've planned for ourselves. Now, why we always have these abstract long intros, it's not to confuse the mind, but it's to get the nervous system firing. That's what we want to do. We want to allow ourselves to carefully allow the imagery to form, the visual to form, right? We want to be able to really sit down with ourselves and look ourselves in the mirror without having a feeling that we're rushing to conclusions. That's not what we want to do. That's what the world is doing today. Everything wants speed. Everything needs to be rushed into its final end result, the final form. Hey, What's the like give me a shortcut. I'll just go and ask AI, hey, give me a shortcut to Jordan Peterson's book. What's Jordan Peterson trying to say? But in truth, if you are seeking spiritual advancement, right? And if you understand the meaning of symbolism, you don't really care about what Jordan Peterson wants to say in his book. Even Jordan Peterson doesn't know what he's saying in his book because his book, as a symbol, as something that is a growing, living thing, something that outgrew its master and its creator, right? Especially if it's written well with the correct intentions. You want to know what the manuscript is telling you, not Jordan Peterson. Because what Jordan Peterson is telling you is what he wanted to tell you at the beginning of the book. As Jordan Peterson is writing the book, as the book is running away from him, right? It becomes something more than Jordan Peterson. It Same thing for Stephen King, same thing for Brandon Sanderson, right? Same thing for George Martin, same thing for all of these authors. The thing becomes greater than the master because the thing prompts the master to reevaluate himself. Your life is the same, and so is mine. Do you have a plan for yourself for the next 5 to 10 years? You probably do. It's quite chronological, it's linear. You have a decent understanding, I guess that's fair to say, a decent understanding of where you wish to be or how you imagine to be. Like, I imagined myself to be in great shape in 5 to 6 years. I imagine that, I'm highly athletic again, like I was in my prime years. I'm more spiritually evolved. I'm doing well financially, right? My relationship is going great. I'm a responsible human being. Blah blah blah. Because all of these things represent the values that I have right now, and the chronology or the order of the things that I deem important at this stage of life, at this stage of advancement. So humor me for a moment. Just humor me for a moment and consider this idea. It might be a little bit out there, but just consider it. Like, allow it to exist in your mind's eye. You don't have to become, you don't have to subscribe to it. You don't have to become enamored with the idea. Just allow it to exist as a sort of a mental experiment, right? What if I told you that where time is going and where time has been, that the radical ends of those two things are interconnected and conjoined. They're the same thing. So you always have this image of like, well, time is going somewhere forwards. It's like a train through a metro station, right? It can only go forward. But you ride the train long enough and you realize, hey, wait a second. If we ride long enough, we'll end up just where we started. So what's different? Well, the train is the same, the tracks are the same, right? The journey is the same, but those taking the journey are not the same people because they have already taken the journey. So if you want a higher understanding of time outside of the framework of three-dimensional reality, right? You have to understand that you live in a loop within a loop, within a loop, within a loop. This is why we say that all prophecies are cyclical, that all prophecies are destined to come true. If a prophecy exists, it's destined to come true. Why? Because it's a cycle. It's not a prediction. It's a cycle that happens over and over and over again. So every great prophecy, every great hero, every great archetype, every great avatar of the grand story of life must and will emerge, regardless of our needs and wants and desires. All we have to do is figure out where exactly we are in the story in this present moment. So, to someone, to the average person who goes through their life in a linear manner, right? Well, I was a teenager and now I've grown up and I'm an adult and then I'm going to get old and then I'm going to pass away. If I told that person, well, you know what? What if I told you a crazy thing? What if I told you something like, well, the pyramids, like they exist, of course, but they haven't been built yet. What if I told you, well, Machu Picchu, like it exists, but it hasn't been built yet? Not really. Like you think it's a thing of the past, but the coming future also holds it. It's just that you can't spread the time frame of your existence, like the time frame of your incarnation or your life, which is like let's say 100 or 110 years, like something along those lines. You can't spread that like like thin butter over bread, right? Like eventually it starts and eventually it ends, so you never really approach the loop of the ending. But you have to understand that time in and of itself, its geometric quality of time is that of a vortex. And what a vortex does is it spins and spins and spins and it spins up, right? So when water is being drained into a hole, right, or in the sink, first it's slow, and then as the water grows, smaller and smaller, it increases in speed. It speeds up, and then it gets sucked into the sink, right? Now you can look at time from a three-dimensional perspective in that exact manner. That's what's going on right now. That's why the days are getting shorter and everything feels like it's speeding up. Ooh. But we're approaching a moment where consciousness must flush itself down and through, right? So when that happens, when the water is flushed down the drain, right? Where does the water go? It goes on the other side, right? And the next song begins. Now, if you study the geometric quality of pi, right? Or actually, if you study music and you understand how the chronology of each musical note affects the other or affects the whole, you'll go like do, re, mi, fa, so on and so forth, and you reach the end and you restart the whole song again. You think you're starting from the same point, right? Naturally, like mathematically. But that's not true. Every time you restart the song, you restart the chronology, you change the tone just slightly. So you're revisiting the same pattern and the same melody, if you could call it that, but you're experiencing it in a different way. And now time is of similar structure. So we're experiencing the reinterpretation of the eternal story. And what is this eternal story? Well, it's the only story that has ever existed. But the reinterpretation of this story, the rehashing, right? The loop, right? The passengers in the loop, which is, let's say, our collective consciousnesses, the passengers in the train, they change. And if the passengers change, then the journey must change. Of course. Different passengers, different experiences, but the same loop. So this is where you find yourself, right? And you'll get on the train station at some point, you'll incarnate, and then you'll get off at some other point, and you feel, well, I've made the journey. I've gone from point A to point B where I wanted to go. You don't ride the train long enough to see it return from point A to point A. So yes, you are living among giants, and you are living among all of the reinterpretations, the other songs, the other layers of frequency of the same story rehashing itself in infinite multitudes. Yes, you are. But you're on a different train, on a different train track. So that's why you're not really seeing it. Sometimes, you just might. You might see a neighboring train pass by, right? And sometimes there's some sort of innate desire to hop off your current train and hop onto the next one. Is that possible? At certain junction points, it is. At certain junction points, it is. But I'll tell you a little secret. Again, if you study the music and how it goes, if you study the pattern, right? If you study 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0, the one that starts, the one that comes after that, right? We still see that as one, but it's not the same one as the first one was because something precedes it now. Like, really imagine this, like, really envision what I'm saying here. Something precedes it. And because something precedes it, this one carries more inherent value, like we spoke about the author, right? And the manuscript running away from the author. It's different. It's the same, but it's just slightly different enough to give you the warm and fuzzies. It changes the song. It changes the tone. Now, if you play the song, right, in a different frequency, so if a song is recorded in the studio, let's say it's mastered and produced and whatever by Rick Rubin, ooh, amazing music producer, and it's done in 440 hertz, right? And if you take that same song and you play that same song in 432 hertz, right? What they call the frequency of the earth or whatever, right? It's the same song. You know exactly how it's going to go. You expect it, but it sounds so different because the tone is different. Well, that's where you are. The pyramids, for example, they've been built in the past 1,000 billion times. And they will keep being built 100,000 billion times in the future as well. We will, we do, we are in the process of building the pyramids even now, even today. You might not know it, you might not see it, and so did our predecessors not see. And so will the men and women of the future. They will bask in the glory of our ancient creation, and they will have similar thoughts and similar questions as we do because they'll be riding the same train. The king will rise, the king will fall. Betrayal will be met with betrayal. Fire will be fought with fire. This is the meaning of the loop. But the secret of the loop and why math is open ended. There's no closing point in math. Everything ends with a point 1 1 1 1 1 1 or point 2 2 2 2 or point 3 3 or whatever, right? Now that, my friends, is the portal to infinity. That's why you live in a world that is changing itself. It's headed into the unknown, but it can't change itself too much. Like as if you were developing a play or developing a video game, right? When you when the development team introduces a new feature or element into the game, what do? They save the previous version because if something goes wrong, they can always revert back to the previous version. They can always steal time back away, right? And revert to what it was. These things are done with caution. The universe moves with caution, right? And there's a lesson in that. So, what are the practical implications of this sort of knowledge? Ooh, my mind, it's blown away. Da, da, da. Who cares? What matters here is one's ability to discern the the implications on the everyday that this sort of information has, right? And you have to understand that your relationship with yourself in terms of past and future is rather flawed, even though you are, in a sense, from your perspective, going through a linear time stream, right? There's no other way to explain it. It's true, it's objectively so. We are born, we grow old, we die and pass away. But what if I told you that you are already all the things that you are going to become? The the magical things, the juices already exist within you that are destined and fated to arise. They're already there, implanted somewhere deep within you, and they're arising as we speak. And all of the things that you were in the past, they are arising at the same time as we speak as well. Because what you have been in the past is just your own limited interpretation of your own database of references and database of memories. That's what they are. So when you change your perspective on your memories, when you derive more from them, are they the same thing? Well, they do follow the same chronology, but do they have the same philosophical and spiritual value? Do they have the same psychosomatic effect on your body in the present? Of course not. Of course not. They become enhanced. So you can say the past is frozen in time. That past is destined to be revisited. But even now, in our current state, you can revisit the past and you can derive more from it. You can make it more than it is or was. So the past lives beside you, it lives alongside you, it lives and breathes alongside whatever you're doing now. And you can derive new things from it. You can revisit the past, you can reanalyze it, you can create a new perspective of who you have been, and a new perspective of who you have been exactly, and the things that you realize and understand about yourself from staring at the frozen imagery, which is the memories of your past selves, right? They allow your present self to change. So if your present self has changed, then has the past also changed? I would argue yes. The quality, the tone of the past, the intonation, the color grading, the the philosophical value of your past has changed, and you have made that change. And all it needed was a change in perspective. So you cannot change the things that happened. No one can. And I'll tell you this too. You can't change the things that are going to happen either, because you can't be wiser than your future self. The author has a plan, yes, but the author doesn't know if their plan will hold as they're writing the manuscript. You have a plan. I have a plan for my life. We are all in this dance together. We're writing it out. But in truth, you don't know how you'll react to things that are coming. You can just hope for the best. You can grow your present self. And you can grow your present self from the promise of the future and deliberation and pondering and curiosity about the future and planning and so on and so forth. And you can also grow your current self from the past by revisiting the past and readjusting the past. And once you've sucked out all of the juices, all of the gifts from your past, you can position yourself in the present moment, maybe, just maybe, a little bit better to deal with the comings of the future. And now, which future are we talking about exactly? Well, remember what we said about hopping trains and train tracks? That's the ordeal. Now, there are junction points, and sometimes the tunnel's, not too dark. It's like dimly lit enough for you to see the next train passing you by. Sometimes maybe you'll see a pretty girl on the other side, right? That you're enamored with, or you see your own reflection in the glass window pane or the glass window, whatever, of the other train, and you want to hop onto that junction. Well, first you have to fit in. You need a ticket. How do you get the ticket? Well, you have to become worthy of the junction. You need to become a trusted persona when security, you know, looks at you and face control checks you out, and they have to give you a sort of a vibe check, right? Well, are you vibing well enough for the party train, Mr. Poopy Pants, right? Or are you still better fit for the train you were on, whatever train that was? So if you want to understand where you're going, the simplest way to do that is to understand where you are in the story and what kind of story you're in, where we as a collective are. And if we want to switch tracks, if you want to switch tracks on an individual level or individual basis, you have to understand that the way you grow is largely determined by the way you are right now. And if everyone's behaving like a degenerate monkey on the train you're on, it gets really difficult to not follow their lead, to not conform to what the environment is showing you. But sometimes, if you have little visions, little hints, in the periphery, you see, like, hey, you know what? Like, maybe there's a better time on that other train somewhere, right? Can you simulate that on your own train? Can you perhaps try to live as though you're already on the party train, where everyone's nice and everything's clean and everything's gentle and soft and warm and fuzzy and rhythmic and orderly and brilliant and beautiful and so on and so forth? Can you do those things? Can you live as though you're on the other train even though you're not? Well, right now you're on a train when the pyramids don't work. The pyramids do not work. They're in terrible disrepair. Well, the timeline in which the pyramids work again, I know this sounds fantastical, but the timeline in which the pyramids work again, that timeline isn't going to come out of this timeline. And the people who want to live in that timeline, they're going to seem a little bit cuckoo in the head, boys and girls. They're going to seem a tiny bit insane for the people who are inhabiting this one. What do you have to smile about? Why are you so nice to everyone? Why are you so charitable and giving? Why do you advocate against swearing and deception and evil and pain and hurt and yada yada? Why do you do it with such relentless fervor? Why are you suffering? Why are you grieving for the world? Why do you shed a tear for the suffering of others? Hey, I don't know, man. Maybe because, maybe because just for a moment, just for a tiny little twinkle of a moment, I've seen what goes on in the other train. And there's a fiesta on there. And I want the fiesta. I want to be on the fiesta. It's a great place. It's a wonderful place. So those who don't see the fiesta, right, they don't even realize it exists. They think they're going somewhere on a linear time stream. That's the only place they can go. And yes, if they, you know, pass the circle or cross the circle long enough, they'll eventually realize that yeah, we can probably deviate a little bit from the music, right? We can deviate a little bit, like naturally it happens. So that is their fated destiny to eventually go into a higher pitch, a softer pitch of the music. Like if you play the instrument, if you play the song or the tune of life on an instrument long enough, eventually like the chords and the strings are gonna come loose, right? They'll soften, they'll vibrate a little bit better or whatever. But you don't have to wait for that. I don't have to wait for that. Because if time is a line, then eventually it'll have to crash into something. But what if I told you that the only thing time as a linear stream crashes into is itself, is its own tail? Yeah? That's when destruction happens. That's when the snake or the Ouroboros starts to eat its own tail, my dearest of friends. That's what that symbol represents. But what the vortex represents, it represents that the crash never happens. And we live alongside, we just barely miss the tail. And we live alongside perfect union of the past, of the present, and the future, which is going to be cyclical again and very similar to what happened in the past, but it's going to be in an elevated tone or form. So, what you're experiencing right now, I would say, and all of us collectively as human beings are experiencing right now, is a renewed affliction, right? Well, which prophecy will it be, right? Do we want to crash hard into our own tail and repeat the same cycle? Do we really want to do that? Or do we want to hop on the Fiesta train? I want to hop on the Fiesta train. Let's stop talking about time now. Let's just understand this, that the the meaning of spiritual study and understanding complex spiritual topics is to, and it's true, it's to give you practical aid in your everyday life. If it cannot be formed in such a way or performed in such a way, your spiritual knowledge, that it doesn't increase or elevate your life experience somehow, then it wasn't knowledge in the first place. It was just an idea, just a theory, right? But the lesson behind this concept is very simple, but it's extremely profound. And the more you think about it, yes, it is fantastical, whatever, but the more you think about it, and some people, some souls innately already know this, by the way, but if you really think about it, it's a very simple lesson. Can you perform the dance that summons the place that you wish to go to? Can you do that? But you're not going to get applause. and you might have tomatoes thrown at you. So you understand the people who understand the concept of going beyond who they are and where they are and surrendering to the vision of who they wish to become in the future, those are the best writers because they're attempting to write something that they know will take a life of its own. Can you write the story of your life in a way that is misaligned with the current whole, with the current reality, with the collective consensus objective reality? The world is ruled by evil, dark doppelganger elites, this and that, blah, blah, blah. I don't live in that world. That's why I call it the art of quiet living. I don't live in that world. Yet I am enthralled by that world and I am chained and bound by that world spiritually, philosophically, morally, mentally. I don't live in that world, right? This is borderline insane if you don't understand the difference between insanity and manifestation. Now, I can confess to myself, I can admit that I belong to that world. I am currently existing in that world, but I am not living as if I exist in that world. I am living as if I exist in heavenly, divine, sacred order. I live in a plane of existence. I live in a world where I find incredible success. I live in a world where I hold myself to the highest standards of purity and of heaven. That's where I want to live. So you could say that I'm a tryhard or a wannabe, right? And all of the spiritual seekers and masters are, right? I'm aspirationally awakened. I'm aspirationally not a crappy person. And you can be that too. You can aspire to be something you don't even understand how you could possibly become, right? And you have to live as though that future self. You have to act as though that future self. You have to behave as though that future self. You have to think as though that future self. You have to feel as though that future self. That's the secret. That's the big secret of helping our decaying, immoral, degenerate, regressive, childlike, infantile, poor, sad, sorrowful, grieving, degenerate, collective soul, collective human race, the human species, as one part, as one whole of the grander whole, to perhaps ascend to a higher form of reality where we do not abolish ourselves through our own, I'll just say it, retardation. So the idea behind it is very simple. For those who claim to have proof and truth of spiritual living, right? Or the the soul machinery or the makeup of the world and all the hidden secrets and all the symbols and yada yada, those who claim to have information, right? They will always backfire it onto the collective, right? They don't understand that destroying and dismantling parts of the collective for personal gain only takes us to a worse place, right? They're damning themselves. They're damning. That's why it says, that's why religious texts, for example, will say it's eternal damnation. Why is it eternal? Are you going to be there for 10, 100,000 years? No, it's eternal because you're closing the loop, you idiot fools, right? You're closing the circle. That's why it's eternal. You are in the eternal damnation as you speak. So the moment you close the loop, it becomes eternal. You understand? Hell is a place where everything is frozen in time, right? It's a frozen lake. It's a frozen in time. It's a mirror of everything that's happened before. And hell is a place where everything is so dull and so boring and so predictable. And what causes insanity more than doing the same thing, no matter how pleasurable, no matter how great, over and over and over and over and over again? That's the definition of hell. That's the definition of insanity. So we must invite change through changing of the self. Even if you don't know exactly where you're going, no one knows. Even the highest timeline of all timelines doesn't know where it's going. It just knows that it has to be aspirationally better than it is now. The Lord of the Rings. Ooh, all that symbolism, all that beautiful, beautiful, beautiful symbolism that your eyes become open to once you realize and understand the symbolic quality and the depth of wisdom that is found in all popular media, all these persons who were avatarized as channelers of the same divine story unfolding before us, right? The same archetypal story. It is a mirror within a mirror world, teaching us and showing us what we contend with. And at the end of the day, where the greatest battle happens, it is the struggle within the human heart. That's where the greatest battles happen. Even today, that's where the battlefield is. That's where the battle is taking place. Can I force a world upon you? Can I force an environment upon you that will incite you to corrupt that which is holy and sacred within you, that which is pure and innocent within you? Can I achieve? That's what the world is asking you, because we live in a dark timeline. It would be foolish to deny it. We don't live in the darkest one, but we do live in a dark timeline. So the question the world is giving you is this: hey, spiritual seeker, I will give you everything you desire at the cost of others, and you'll never even experience the loop closing. Your lifetime will be over far before you get to experience it. At least this one. And the next one you're in, you won't even remember it. Who cares about some future karmic event? I'll give you everything. I'll give you the whole world. Just become enslaved to the idea, right, of just one more repeat. And the spiritual seeker, why do we say that the spiritual seeker must liberate himself from the material gains and goodies? Is it because the material world is bad? Of course it's not bad, but it must, or he must, or she must liberate themselves from attachment to the material goods, because that is the price of behaving like, aspirationally behaving like someone from a better place. You've never been there, you can't even imagine it, you don't know what it looks like, you don't know what it smells like, but maybe you just have, like, if you're close enough with your spiritual advancement, with your if you're close enough, and if you're cautious, careful, and quiet enough, sometimes you might get a little hint of it. You might get a little lick of it. You might see a vision dream. You might meet someone on the street that doesn't feel like they're from here. You might hear a word or read a poem that's just too beautiful for this realm. You might look upon the pyramids and marvel at the architecture and just feel like these things shouldn't be here. These things shouldn't exist. It's like they're windows to another realm, to a realm of greater possibilities. And all of the symbolism they carry, right? Their alignment with the stars and their geometry and the enigmatic nature of their placement and the symbology behind their form. When you look at them, you realize that this is a portal to a future that could potentially come to pass. And we are afforded the luxury of these portals. We are afforded people from other realms, from greater places, from higher timelines. You're afforded the people. Again, I will say it again. Sometimes you will meet someone and they will tell you something that feels off, but it feels more on than off, if that makes sense. You'll hear a bit of wisdom. You'll hear a word or a song or a tune, or you'll have an image or a vision, or you'll see a painting, and it'll transform you to a world that cannot possibly exist, that shouldn't exist, that doesn't yet exist. But it's a portal to such beauty. It's an entryway to such beauty. It's a pathway to a mind state that elevates your spirit to the point where you feel like it's blissful, it's heavenly, it's unexplainably, irrationally, doggedly warm and brilliant. And that might just be enough to incite and inspire you to play an aspirational role into bringing that reality forth, into helping manifesting the higher kingdom and practicing holding the image of the most beautiful thing you can envision in your mind, of holding that vision and becoming inspired by that vision so that you yourself can become a portal to that place. And if you can achieve that, and if we can shake hands and have a conversation and exchange energies and words and truths, and you tell me a story of this grandiose realm or this grandiose place, or if I read a book written by you or a poem written by you, inspired by this distant, faraway realm, maybe I'll also subscribe to the idea of it. And maybe I will also be inspired to play my part in bringing it forth. This is the great work. This is the real great work of our world. And the very few, the very, 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 very few who can conceptualize and understand it are the ones who are putting their hearts out on the front lines. They're the crazy ones. They're the dreamers. They're the ones who exist beyond the rational, who exist beyond logic, beyond the common mannerisms of survival, of a survival based lifestyle. I have to constantly remind myself I'm not here to survive, and I'm not even here to thrive. I'm here to help bring about the thing that I sometimes see and feel. That I've had the luxury to hold that image in my head and to understand what true bliss and warmth feels like. Not physical warmth, not warmth like the sun, like a warmth that cannot burn you, like a warming of the soul. And again, if you can be aspirationally better, if you can be aspirationally pure, aspirationally well intentioned, aspirationally honest, aspirationally better, you too will start seeing the other train on the other tracks. You're going to be seeing bits and pieces of it, like a dream, like a memory that's not supposed to be there, but it is, and it's beautiful. It's calling to you. And maybe then you'll understand the movement of those who might seem idiotic to the person who's living a life of survival. Someone who turns the other cheek will seem idiotic to the person who's living for personal benefit because they don't understand the wisdom behind turning the other cheek. The moment I punch you in the face, I bury myself in who I used to be. But the moment I behave like I live in a world where we are fellow humans, avoidant of conflict, in hopes that maybe my self sacrifice, my self crucifixion will show you something. My example will show you something. It'll be so incredibly bizarre for you. It'll be so fantastical for you that maybe you'll sit down one day, several years after, and just think like, what prompted this person to allow me to slap them as they turned the other cheek? I don't understand it. I don't understand it. And maybe several years down the line, you'll also go through the same thought process of maybe I underestimate the depth of the meaning of that action. Maybe there's more to it. That little tiny bit of hope, that should be a glimpse of how great the other realm must be for the human to be prompted to such self mastery that it goes against his base survival instincts for self preservation. And it's exactly that journey and that mind state that they're in that will even allow them to hop off of this train and hop on the other. That's how they become worthy of the transition. So think on that. Really think on that. Become aspirational of your future self. Readjust the past. Huh? Readjust the past, revisit it, gain a new perspective, derive more depth from it, derive more meaning and value from the past, upgrade your present self so that you can envision a more beautiful future, and then become aspirational or aspirationally good to fit the image of that future. And in your efforts, if your efforts are true and well intentioned and pure, maybe, just maybe, you'll be able to hit that infinitesimally small point that we've been trying to hit. Because what guides you to that point is that image, is that image of the most beautiful thing that you can possibly imagine in your mind. And if you hold that image in your mind, you'll see that it upgrades. It it goes upwards. It readjusts itself. It becomes more and more and more and more, and then eventually it starts to speak to you. What's the most beautiful thing you can imagine today? It's not going to be the same thing that you'll be able to imagine tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after, and the day after. That's the wisdom behind the practice. It's an ever growing thing. So if you want to know the limitations of your consciousness and of your spiritual advancement, well, sit down every day like Uncle Jack taught you and imagine the most beautiful shape you can. The most beautiful thing you can possibly imagine, and see it change and unfold and unfurl into something more and greater over time. You do that every day, right? And then eventually you might just approach something that speaks to you, something that shows you things, something that's beyond our world, right? Yeah, there you go. If you like the spaces, share it, like it. It helps me, motivates me to do more. Put it all over your walls. Much love to you all. Hope you have a great day. And yeah, think about what we talk and share my spaces. Bye bye.